He found her alone, in tears, without imagining what he would hear. But when the young woman looked into the millionaire CEO's eyes and whispered, "Stay with me," something in him simply broke. Watch this story until the end. You'll be surprised by this story. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. Every day we post videos like this. Continuing. The Alistair Holdings building loomed over Canary Wharf like a monument to power. 42 floors of mirrored glass reflected the London sky, a sky that alternated between rare blue and polluted grey. On the top floor was the office of Henry Alistair, 38, CEO of the company his grandfather had founded, and his father had expanded before dying prematurely in a helicopter crash. Henry had taken command at 32, transforming the company into an even greater powerhouse, always with the same non-negotiable rule: no attachments, no showing weakness, no giving in. Claire Meadows, 26, adjusted her executive assistant badge around her neck. She had been in the position for only 3 months, long enough to understand why the 5 other assistants before her hadn't lasted longer. Henry was demanding to the core, a perfectionist, meticulous, and rarely looked into the eyes of those he spoke with. Claire came from Dagenham, the daughter of a bus driver and a seamstress. She had earned her business administration degree by studying at night, working during the day as a cashier in a pharmacy to pay for her private college tuition. She was the first in her family to earn a university degree, the first to step into a place like that. That Thursday morning, Claire woke up at 5:30 a.m. as usual. The small one-bedroom apartment she rented in the Stratford neighbourhood was almost 2 hours from Canary Wharf on good traffic days. Her morning ritual was almost military: a quick shower, hair tied in a low bun, subtle makeup, impeccable uniform. She had 3 identical sets of black pencil skirts and white blouses, which she washed and ironed religiously on Sundays. That day's routine would be altered by a small detail. Her only pair of mid-heeled shoes had torn the day before. She had to wear her only pair of high-heeled shoes, black, elegant, but which pinched her toes after a few hours. "Good morning, Mr. Alistair," Claire said when he emerged from the private elevator that connected the garage to his office. Promptly, at 7:45 a.m., he replied with an almost imperceptible nod. As always, she had already prepared the meeting room for the 8 a.m. encounter, organized the reports in order of relevance, and left a bottle of water at the exact temperature he preferred. Room temperature. No ice. The meeting with the foreign investors would last until 11 a.m. In the meantime, Claire occupied herself answering emails, organizing the following week's agenda, and trying to ignore the growing discomfort in her feet. When the clock struck 10:30 a.m., she began preparing the coffee she would serve as soon as the meeting ended. Henry drank his coffee bitter, without sugar, without milk, pure, hot, strong. Like his personality, Claire thought. Something made her deviate from protocol that day. Perhaps it was the comment she accidentally overheard while serving water in the meeting room. One of the investors commenting on Henry's coldness, saying that not even a robot would be so devoid of emotion. Claire felt an inexplicable urge to humanize that moment. She added a small spoon of sugar to the coffee, just enough to slightly break the bitterness without making it too sweet. A small, almost insignificant gesture, but one that violated all the rules. The meeting ended promptly at 11 a.m. The men in suits left the room discussing numbers and projections. Henry was the last. Claire entered with the coffee in a white porcelain cup. "Your coffee, Mr. Alistair," she said, placing it on the glass table. She watched as he picked up the cup, brought it to his lips, and took the first sip. It was as if a storm cloud formed on his face. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice low and controlled, yet laden with something Claire couldn't identify. "Pardon? The coffee. It's different. What did you do?" His green eyes now stared directly at her, something rare. "I added a small amount of sugar. I thought that—" "You thought? That's the problem, Miss Meadows. You're not paid to think. You're paid to execute my orders exactly as they are given." He placed the cup back on the table, as if contact with that liquid would contaminate him. "I prefer everything bitter, including my day. This is the last warning. Don't make decisions for me again." He turned his back and entered his office, leaving Claire paralyzed, with a blush rising from her neck to her cheeks. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from contained anger, shame, indignation. Her toes throbbed inside her tight shoes. She took 3 deep breaths, as her mother had taught her. She returned to her desk, swallowed her wounded pride along with the urge to cry, and continued her work. The days that followed were marked by a strange dynamic. Claire maintained her usual efficiency, now with an almost unhealthy care not to make mistakes. Henry, in turn, began to notice her more, not with approval or kindness, but as if he were watching her, waiting for the next slip. Sometimes she caught him looking at her when he thought he wasn't being observed. It was a different look, not of professional evaluation, but something more intimate, as if he were trying to decipher a code that even she didn't know. On a Friday, almost a month after the coffee incident, Claire had to stay late to finalize an urgent report. The office was practically empty. Only the cleaning crew circulated in the corridors, and Henry Cohns, who was still working in his office. She finished the report around 8 p.m., printed a copy, and went to his office to deliver it. She knocked twice and entered after hearing a dry "come in." "The report you asked for," she said, placing the folder on the desk. Henry looked up from his computer screen. For the first time, Claire saw him without his jacket, his shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong arms with subtly visible veins. His always immaculately slicked back hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had run his fingers through it several times. There was something vulnerable about that disheveled version of Henry Alistair. "Thank you," he said, his voice lower than usual. "It's past your hours." "Yes, but you said you needed this report today, so—" "You always keep your promises, don't you?" The question was accompanied by a look that completely disarmed her. "I try my best," she replied, feeling her heart quicken without understanding why. He stood up, walked around the desk, and approached her. Claire felt a mix of apprehension and something else, something she couldn't name. He was close enough for her to smell his expensive cologne, a mix of sandalwood, bergamot, and something uniquely his. "Why are you still here, Claire? You've had 5 assistants before you. None lasted more than 3 months. It was the first time he had called her by her first name. "I need this job," she replied honestly, "and I know I'm good at what I do." A half smile, the first she had seen on that face, appeared at the corner of his lips. "Yes, you are." The statement came as a reluctant confession. "Anything else I should know about the report?" Claire swallowed hard. "No, sir, it's all there." As she turned to leave, she felt his hand lightly touch her wrist. It was a brief, almost accidental contact, but it sent an electric current through her skin. "I'll rest this weekend. Monday we have the presentation to the board." Claire nodded and left the office, trying to control the tremor in her legs and the confusion in her thoughts. What had just happened? In the following weeks, the dynamic between them subtly changed. Henry was still demanding and often cold, but now there were moments, brief, almost imperceptible to an outsider, when something more emerged, a gaze that lingered too long. "I thank you," accompanied by an almost smile, fingers that brushed when passing documents. Claire began to notice other details, how he furrowed his brow when he was concentrating, the way his jaw tensed when he was irritated, the way his eyes became greener under certain lights. One Wednesday morning, 3.5 months after Claire started working there, an elegant woman appeared in the office, without a prior appointment. Tall, slender, perfectly coiffed blonde hair, a dress that looked straight out of a fashion magazine. "I want to see Henry," she said, with the intimacy of someone who didn't need surnames. "Mr. Alistair is on a conference call at the moment. Can I help you?" Claire maintained a professional tone. "Tell him Gabriel is here. He'll interrupt anything for me." The woman's smile had something predatory about it. Claire called the internal line. "Mr. Alistair, I apologize for the interruption. Miss Gabrielle is here and insists on seeing you." There was silence on the other end, followed by a deep breath that Claire could hear. "Send her in," he finally said, in a tone Claire had never heard before. He sounded resigned. The woman entered the office and closed the door. For the next 20 minutes, Claire tried to focus on her work, but couldn't help but hear the tone of the conversation occasionally rising. She couldn't distinguish words, only the cadence, moments of calm speech, followed by peaks of discussion. When Gabrielle finally left the office, She walked past Claire as if she didn't exist, her French perfume leaving a trail in the air. Henry appeared at the door, his face tense. "Miss Meadows, in my office, please." Claire's heart raced. She grabbed her notepad and entered. He wasn't sitting behind his desk as usual. He was standing near the window, looking out at London's grey horizon. "That was my ex-wife," he said, without turning around. "We've been separated for 2 years." Claire didn't know what to say. Why was he sharing this with her? "We have joint business ventures that haven't been fully disentangled yet." He finally turned around. "This isn't relevant to your work. I just wanted to clarify. You don't need to explain yourself, sir." "I'm not explaining. I'm providing context." His voice hardened again. "Miss Meadows, I've noticed changes in your demeanor in recent weeks." Claire froze. "Is there a problem with my performance?" "The problem?" He moved closer, standing less than a meter from her. "Is that you're becoming a distraction?" The air seemed to leave her lungs. "I don't understand." "I believe you do understand. Something is happening here, and I cannot allow it to continue." Claire felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. "Mr. Alistair, I have always maintained professionalism. I'm not talking about your actions, Miss Meadows." His eyes now seemed even greener, almost feverish. "I'm talking about what's happening to me, and that is unacceptable." He stepped away as if he needed that distance to say what came next. "I regret to inform you that your services will no longer be required as of today." Claire felt as if she had been slapped. "You're firing me. Why?" "Incompatibility with the professional environment." The answer came mechanically, rehearsed. "HR will process your termination. All your rights will be respected. With an additional month's salary as compensation, your personal belongings will be sent to your address." Tears threatened to form in Claire's eyes, but she wouldn't give him the pleasure of seeing her vulnerable. She took a deep breath, lifted her chin. "I understand, Mr. Alistair." Her voice came out firm, surprising both of them. "If my presence has become so disruptive to your self-control, I understand that the easiest solution is to remove me from the equation." For a moment, something akin to regret passed through his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by his usual coldness. "I appreciate your understanding. You may leave now." Claire walked out of the office with her head held high. She went to her desk, took only her purse and a photo of her mother that she kept in her drawer. She ignored the curious glances of her colleagues. In the elevator, she allowed a single tear to escape, not from sadness, but from anger at herself, for having allowed that man to stir her feelings, at him, for being such a coward. As the elevator descended the 42 floors, Claire made a promise to herself. Henry Alistair would bitterly regret having underestimated her. She wasn't just another disposable assistant. She was Claire Meadows, the girl from Dagenham, who had gotten this far on her own merit. And no man, no matter how powerful, rich or attractive, would make her feel small again. What Claire didn't know, as she left the imposing building for the suffocating heat of London, was that on the 42nd floor, Henry Alistair stood, paralyzed, looking at the empty chair she had occupied for almost 4 months. For the first time in many years, he had broken his own rule. He had allowed someone to get close enough to make his heart, which he judged dead after his devastating divorce, beat again. And as he always did when he felt vulnerable, he had attacked first, eliminating the threat. What neither of them could foresee was that this dismissal would not be the end, but merely the turbulent beginning of something much deeper that both would try, without success, to resist. In the 2 months following her dismissal, Claire reinvented herself. The severance pay and compensation allowed her to breathe while she searched for a new job. Her resume now boasted experience at Alistair Holdings, which opened doors. After several interviews, she was hired as an assistant director at the Horizon Foundation, a non-profit organization focused on educational projects in underprivileged communities. The salary was lower, but the purpose of the work compensated for the difference. In her free time, Claire began volunteering for a social project in Brixton, a peripheral London neighborhood where her aunt lived. The project offered after-school tutoring, art workshops, and psychological support for children and adolescents in vulnerable situations. The initiative was small, operating in the back of a local church with limited resources and a lot of manual labor. Painting walls, organizing donations, preparing snacks, activities Claire had never imagined doing, but which now filled her heart in a way no executive position ever could. One Friday evening, Claire was in her small apartment, choosing what to wear. She had been invited to a charity event at the Royal Exchange, an elegant venue in Mayfair. The Horizon Foundation had managed to get tickets, and her boss had insisted she go, saying it would be a good networking opportunity. The dress she chose had been a gift from her mother, a long navy blue dress with a simple yet elegant cut. She had saved up to buy a pair of matching heeled sandals. The taxi dropped her at the venue entrance around 8 p.m. Her initial nervousness was replaced by a quiet confidence, as she realized she could carry herself naturally in that environment. Her work at Alistair Holdings had taught her the social codes of London's elite. During the first hour, she circulated through the hall, chatting with some acquaintances from the foundation, enjoying the music from the string quartet playing discreetly in a corner. That's when she noticed a commotion near the main entrance. Henry Alistair had just arrived, accompanied by a slender brunette in a red dress that seemed painted on her body. Claire felt her stomach drop. She hadn't expected to see him there, though she should have imagined. Charity events were marketing opportunities for companies like Alistair Holdings to polish their image. Claire tried to blend in with the guests, trying to stay out of his line of sight. She was rescued by Michael, a colleague from the foundation who invited her to dance. Tall, broad-shouldered, and with an easy smile, Michael was a project director and had shown interest in her since her first day of work. Claire had kept the relationship strictly professional, but that night, she accepted the invitation to dance as a form of distraction. As she twirled across the ballroom in Michael's arms, she felt a gaze upon her. She turned and found Henry's green eyes fixed on her from across the room. Even at a distance, Claire could see the surprise and something more, an intense glint that seemed like fury, or perhaps contained desire. The woman in red said something in his ear, but he seemed not to hear, completely absorbed in the sight of Claire. "Do you know Alistair?" Michael asked, noticing the exchange of glances. "I worked for him for a few months," Claire replied, forcing a smile. "It wasn't an experience I'd like to repeat. He has a reputation for being a tyrant. They say he's made executives cry in meetings. I don't doubt it for a second." The music ended, and they returned near the bar. Claire accepted a glass of sparkling wine, feeling slightly dizzy, not from the drink, but from the adrenaline rushing through her veins. A few minutes later, while chatting with Michael and other colleagues, she felt a presence behind her. The unmistakable scent of sandalwood and bergamot invaded her nostrils even before he spoke. "Miss Meadows, what a pleasant surprise." Claire turned, keeping her face impassive. "Mr. Alistair, likewise, I see you're in good company." His gaze briefly turned to Michael, assessing him with obvious disapproval. "Michael Davies, project director at the Horizon Foundation." The man introduced himself, extending his hand, which Henry squeezed harder than necessary. "Henry Alistair, Alistair Holdings." The name was spoken as if it were a title of nobility. "I hope you're enjoying the evening." "Very much so," Claire replied, taking a sip of sparkling wine without averting her eyes from him. "And you, sir?" Before Henry could answer, the woman in the red dress appeared beside him, linking his arm with rehearsed intimacy. "Darling, I was looking for you. The minister wants to greet us." "Renata, these are people from the Horizon Foundation," Henry said, without making individual introductions. "If you'll excuse me." As he walked away, Claire could feel his tension. He walked like someone carrying an invisible weight on his shoulders. A few hours later, as the event began to thin out, Claire headed to the restroom. On her way back, her arm was gently held. Henry had materialized from a side corridor. "We need to talk," he said in a low, urgent tone. "We have nothing to talk about, Mr. Alistair." Claire tried to pull away, but he didn't release her arm. "Please, Claire, just 5 minutes." The use of her first name momentarily disarmed her. She nodded, allowing him to guide her to a small conservatory attached to the main hall. The space was deserted, lit only by the external lights filtering through the windows. "How are you?" he asked, sounding genuinely interested. "Better than ever." Claire crossed her arms, a physical barrier against the attraction she still felt. "Is that all you wanted to know?" No. Henry ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had never seen him make before. I made a mistake. Which one? You have a considerable list to choose from. Her response caught him by surprise. The Claire he knew would never have responded like that. There was something different about her, a confidence, a strength that wasn't present before. Or perhaps it always was, but he had never noticed. Your dismissal, he finally said. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. Why are you telling me this now? It's been 2 months. Because I couldn't forget. The confession came with difficulty. I tried. God knows I tried. But I can't stop thinking about you. Claire felt a lump in her throat. For weeks she had imagined this moment. Henry admitting his mistake, begging for forgiveness. But reality was more complex than her fantasies. The man in front of her seemed vulnerable in a way she had never imagined possible. What do you expect me to say? That it's all okay? That we can pretend you didn't fire me because you started to feel something for me and it scared you? The words came out harsher than she intended. No, I know I can't erase what I did. Henry took a step towards her. But I would like a chance to get to know you, outside the office, without hierarchies, without expectations. And the woman in red, Renata? A friend? Nothing more. He shook his head. I haven't been with anyone since the divorce. Claire took a deep breath. A part of her wanted to give in, wanted to believe he truly cared. But the stronger part, the one that had grown in recent months, knew it wouldn't be that simple. I'm sorry, Mr. Alistair, but today I'm busy being incompatible outside the professional environment. She smiled, not with anger, but with a quiet certainty of her own worth. If you'll excuse me, my friends are waiting. His expression went from disbelief to something close to admiration. Claire turned and walked back to the ballroom, feeling light and powerful as never before. When she finally left the event, arm in arm with Michael, she knew Henry was watching her from the entrance, and for the first time, it was he who felt small. In the following weeks, Claire received emails, messages, and even flowers at the Foundation's office, all from Henry, all asking for a chance to talk. She ignored them all, not out of pride or revenge, but because she needed this time for herself, to consolidate the new woman she was becoming. One Sunday morning, Claire was coordinating a painting activity at the project's headquarters in Brixton. Children ran through the courtyard, while volunteers painted the worn walls of the old church. She was on a ladder, reaching a higher area, when she heard a familiar voice. Need help with that? Claire almost fell off the ladder. Henry Alistair stood below her, wearing jeans and a blue polo shirt, a look she would never have imagined on him. For a moment, she thought she was hallucinating. What are you doing here? She asked, descending from the ladder. I heard about the project through the Horizon Foundation. I came to offer my services. He looked out of place, like a fish out of water. I know it sounds strange, and it probably is, but I'm trying to be a better person. Claire studied him for long seconds, trying to decipher if it was genuine or another strategy to impress her. She decided it didn't matter. The project needed all the help it could get. Do you know how to use a paint roller? She finally asked. I think I can learn. And so began the improbable scene of Henry Alistair, CEO of London's largest construction company, painting walls in a community project in one of the city's poorer areas. At first, his discomfort was visible. The hands that signed multi-million-pound contracts now held cheap paint rollers. But, little by little, something changed. Claire watched him timidly interact with the children, listen attentively to the elderly who told stories of the neighborhood, share a simple sandwich during the break. At the end of the day, when most volunteers had already left, Claire found Henry sitting on the entrance steps, contemplating the sunset that tinged the sky orange and red, rare colors to see in London. Why did you really come today? She asked, sitting beside him, maintaining a safe distance. Henry was silent for a few moments. When I saw you at that event, I realized there was something different about you, something I had never noticed before, a peace, a certainty. I wanted to understand where that came from. And did you? He smiled, a genuine smile that completely transformed his face. I think I'm starting to understand. It has to do with purpose, doesn't it? With doing something that truly matters. In part. Claire looked at her own hands, now stained with paint. But it has more to do with being true, with not being afraid to show who you really are. I don't know if I've known who I really am for a long time. The confession, so simple and honest, created a crack in the armor Claire had built around her heart. She saw in him, for the first time, not the ruthless CEO, but a lost man trying to find his way back to something real. "We all get lost sometimes," she said, surprising herself with the gentleness in her voice. "The important thing is to have the courage to find yourself again." They sat side by side, in silence, for several minutes, just watching the sky change color. When they finally said goodbye, there were no promises, no expectations, just a silent acknowledgement that something had changed between them. The following week, to everyone's surprise, Henry returned to the project, and the week after that, and the next, without announcements, without grand gestures, just showing up for work, like any other volunteer. Claire observed his gradual transformation from a distance, the way his body seemed more relaxed, how his smile came more easily, how he interacted more and more naturally with people he, months earlier, wouldn't even consider worthy of attention. One Saturday afternoon, after a food parcel distribution drive, Claire was tidying the storage room when Henry appeared to help. They worked side by side for almost an hour, in a comfortable silence that neither felt the need to break. "Claire," he finally said as they stacked the last boxes, "I know I'll probably regret asking, but you and Michael, are you two together?" The question caught her by surprise. "No, we're just colleagues." She hesitated. "Why?" "Because I want to invite you to dinner, a real dinner. Not as ex-boss and ex-employee, just as Henry and Claire." Claire felt her heart race. She had promised herself she wouldn't fall into that trap again, but the man in front of her was no longer the same one who had fired her months ago. And she wasn't the same either. "It's not a good idea," she finally said. "There's a lot of history between us, complicated history. Exactly why we need a new beginning." He took a step towards her. "I'm not asking you to forget the past. I'm asking for a chance to build a different future." Claire studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or falsehood. She found nothing but sincerity and a vulnerability she had never seen before in those green eyes. "One dinner," she conceded, finally. "No expectations." His smile lit up the dimly lit room. "No expectations," he agreed. At that moment, neither of them knew that simple yes would forever change the course of their lives, that the dinner would turn into many others, that conversations would deepen, revealing layers upon layers of two complex people, full of fears and dreams. That distrust would give way to understanding, and understanding, slowly, to love. The first date was at a pizzeria in Soho, far from the sophisticated restaurants Henry usually frequented. He arrived early, choosing a discreet table in the back. When Claire entered, wearing jeans, a white t-shirt and a light jacket, she seemed more nervous than he had ever seen her. "I thought you might back out," he confessed, standing up to pull out her chair. "I almost did," Claire admitted, sitting down. 3 times, while getting ready. Her honesty completely disarmed him. "Ma'am, I'm glad you came." The date started tense, with superficial conversations about the social project, work at the foundation, changes at the construction company, but after the first glass of wine, their defenses began to lower. Claire asked about the divorce. Henry spoke about Gabriel's betrayal with his then best friend, the pain of discovery, the bitterness that had settled in his heart. "It's no excuse for how I treated you," he said, looking directly into her eyes. "But perhaps it explains a little why I became that person." Claire told him about her childhood in Dagenham, her seamstress mother who worked all night to support the family after her father abandoned them, the difficulties of studying, the prejudice she faced in corporate environments for being a woman from a working-class background. "I always felt invisible," she confessed. Like I constantly needed to prove my worth." "You were never invisible to me," Henry said in a low voice. "On the contrary, I saw you too much. That's what scared me." The confession hung between them, laden with unspoken meanings. When they said goodbye at the pizzeria's door, there was a moment of hesitation. Henry leaned in and gently kissed Claire's cheek, a gesture that carried more intimacy than any passionate kiss could have. "Can I call you tomorrow?" he asked. "You can," she replied, feeling simultaneously strong and fragile, courageous and scared. Their encounters multiplied in the following weeks. Cinema, theatre, walks in Hyde Park, afternoons at the social project. More and more the barriers between them fell. Henry showed himself to be different, gentler, more present, more human. Claire allowed herself to be vulnerable, letting him see beyond the determined and independent woman. One night of heavy rain, after dinner at a small Japanese restaurant, Henry insisted on accompanying Claire to her apartment door. They climbed the stairs of the simple building in silence, each step charged with growing anticipation. At the door, Claire turned to thank him for the evening and found Henry looking at her in a way that made her heart stop for an instant. There were no more masks, no more pretenses, just pure desire, mixed with something deeper that neither of them was ready to name. "Good night, Claire," he said, leaning in to kiss her cheek as had become customary. This time, however, she turned her face at the last instant. Their lips met, hesitant at first, then with an urgency that surprised both of them. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer. She intertwined her fingers in his hair, feeling his texture, his warmth, his reality. When they finally separated, breathless, the rain furiously beat against the corridor windows, creating a symphony that seemed to accompany the accelerated rhythm of their hearts. "Do you want to come in?" Claire asked, the words escaping before she could censor them. Henry's eyes darkened with desire, but he shook his head. "Not tonight. Not like this." He touched her face with surprising gentleness. "I want to do everything differently with you, everything the right way." She nodded, a mix of disappointment and relief filling her chest. He kissed her forehead and whispered, "Until tomorrow." Claire entered her apartment and leaned against the closed door, feeling her heart beat like never before. Something was happening, something powerful, frightening and wonderful, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't try to resist. She simply allowed herself to feel. On the other side of the door, Henry slowly descended the stairs, a silly smile on his lips. For the first time he could remember, he felt truly alive, and he knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that he had found something, someone that would change his life forever.